Have you ever wondered why a man, even one surrounded by love, still feels utterly alone? It's not loud, it's not obvious. It rides quietly in the passenger seat, on his way home. A kind of ache no one sees, but it weighs everything down. Tonight, we're not blaming women. We're not blaming men. We're simply opening a door into the loneliness men carry, even when they are loved. It's not about being unloved. It's about being unseen. There's a kind of loneliness men rarely talk about. It's not loud. It's not disparate. It doesn't look like tears or cries for help. It looks like silence at dinner, like lingering in the garage longer than necessary, like driving just a little slower on the way home because no place feels fully safe. A man can hold a child in his arms, listen to his wife's laughter, smile at friends across the room, and still feel as though no one truly knows him. Why? Because for decades, we told him to be a provider, a protector, a rock. We taught him that being dependable means being invulnerable, that being admired means being emotionless, that being a man means being silent about anything that feels too tender. And so, he learned to hide. Not because he's weak, but because he was told that showing his real emotions makes him weak. Even in the presence of love, he feels utterly isolated. The truth is, many men don't lack love. They lack safe spaces. A space where they can collapse without disappointing someone. A space where they can say, "I'm struggling," without being told to man up. So when we look at him and say, "You're loved, why are you sad?" we misunderstand something crucial. Love alone isn't enough when it asks him to stay armored, smiling, silent. And this isn't bitterness. It's exhaustion. Most men aren't asking for sympathy. They're not asking to be rescued. They're asking quietly to be accepted fully, even their vulnerability, even their doubt, even the days when they don't feel strong. But so often, even the people closest to him need him to remain the rock. And that quiet expectation can feel heavier than loneliness itself. Where does this loneliness come from? Even when a man is surrounded by love, it starts early. Boys are told, sometimes with words, but more often through silence and glances, be strong, don't cry, don't complain, handle it. And so, from the very beginning, they learn that expressing sadness, fear, or confusion isn't part of being a man. It's something to suppress, something to manage alone. By the time a boy becomes a man, that lesson is ingrained deep. So deep that even when he wants to reach out, he hesitates. Not because he doesn't trust you, not because he doesn't care, but because a lifetime of conditioning whispers, "Don't burden them, deal with it yourself." So he smiles when he doesn't feel happy. He says, "I'm fine," when he's exhausted. He stays quiet when something inside him aches. Even love, pure, warm, caring love, can't always reach past that armor. His wife may truly love him. His children may adore him. But he often believes he's supposed to protect them from his inner world. That's why he retreats into himself, not because he rejects their love, but because he fears disappointing them with the truth of who he really is. And here's the hardest part. Many men don't even realize this is happening. They're not sitting in silence thinking, "I'm lonely." They're sitting in silence thinking, "I should be able to handle this. I don't want to worry anyone. This is just life." But it's more than that. It's years, decades of emotions unspoken, of fears unexplored, of grief unexpressed. Sometimes, that loneliness shows up as anger, quick frustration at small things. Sometimes, it shows up as withdrawal, choosing to stay late at work or in the garage, just to avoid the pressure of interaction. Sometimes, it shows up as fatigue, the deep kind of tired that no nap can fix. And here's the paradox. The very people who love him most are often the ones who wonder why he's distant. They see the surface. He's quiet. He's distracted. He's detached. They might ask, "Why won't you let me in?" But what he feels inside is a question of his own. Would you still love me if I showed you how tired I really am? That fear, that doubt, is the root of male loneliness. It's not a lack of love. It's a lack of safety to be fully known. This is why a man can sit at dinner with his family, his wife's hand reaching for his children laughing at the table, and yet feel like he's 1,000 miles away, not because he doesn't appreciate them, but because he doesn't know how to let them see him as fragile without feeling like he's failing them. So he carries it all quietly. And the tragedy is this: the longer he carries it alone, the heavier it feels, and the more distant he becomes, even while being loved. You see, this loneliness, it doesn't come out of nowhere. It's not just bad luck or poor communication. It's a slow construction, brick by brick, expectation by expectation, that starts the moment a boy becomes a young man. Society gives him a blueprint: provide, protect, perform, be strong always. He watches his father work long hours without complaint. He sees men on television portrayed as tough, silent, unbreakable. He listens as people praise stoicism, but quietly look down on sensitivity. So what does he learn? That to be respected, he must suppress. Suppress tears. Suppress doubt. Suppress vulnerability. He starts to believe that his value is tied to how much he can carry alone. This armor doesn't appear all at once. It forms slowly, invisibly. The first time he hears, "Don't cry, be a man." The first time someone laughs when he admits fear. The first time he shares a struggle and is met with discomfort or dismissal. Piece by piece, he builds a shield. Not out of arrogance, out of survival. But here's the irony. The armor that protects him from judgment also isolates him from intimacy, even in love. Even when someone cares deeply for him, that care can feel conditional. Be vulnerable but not too much. Be honest but stay strong. Be open but keep providing. It's confusing. So, over time, he learns that being loved often means being useful. A good husband, a reliable provider, a strong father. Roles, not a soul. This is why a man can appear solid, dependable, admired, and still feel invisible inside. He can come home after a long day, put food on the table, help with homework, fix the leaky sink, and then sit in silence, wondering if anyone truly knows who he is beneath all that. It's not that he lacks love. It's that love itself feels tangled with performance, and society reinforces this at every turn. Magazines, movies, casual conversations at work, all quietly repeat the same story. A real man doesn't need help. A real man doesn't show weakness. A real man gets the job done, no matter how he feels inside. So what does he do? He adapts. He becomes a master of appearances, smiling when he's sad, saying, "I'm good," when he's exhausted, providing even when it drains him. But this performance has a cost. The longer he keeps the armor on, the less he knows who he is without it. And that's the tragedy so few talk about. By midlife, many men don't just feel lonely. They feel lost. Not because no one loves them, but because they don't feel safe taking the armor off. Even with those closest to them. Especially with those closest to them. Because what if, when they finally reveal the depth of their weariness, their grief, their quiet pain, they are met with misunderstanding, or worse, with disappointment? So they stay armored. They stay polite, dutiful, strong, and silently alone. Not because they don't want connection, but because they don't believe connection can coexist with authenticity. It seems strange, doesn't it? How can a man sit at the dinner table, his wife smiling across from him, his children laughing nearby, and still feel like an outsider in his own home? How can love itself feel unsafe? The answer is quiet and hard, because even family love, for many men, can feel conditional. Not in a cruel way, not because their families don't care, but because of an invisible expectation woven into the very fabric of family life, that he must always be the strong one. Even when the family loves him dearly, they often need him to be unshakable. If he admits he's tired, there's concern but also subtle fear. What happens if dad isn't okay? If he confesses doubt, there's awkwardness and sometimes an unspoken pull for him to snap out of it. Oster. Even his moments of silence can be misunderstood as distance or coldness. So he learns almost without realizing it that sharing his truth might cause worry, discomfort, or even rejection. And what does a good man do? He protects them from his inner world. He listens to their problems. He offers advice. He shows up in all the ways they need, but he rarely, if ever, asks them to sit with his struggles. Not because he doesn't trust them, but because he's afraid that showing the full weight he carries will shift their view of him, that they'll stop seeing him as dependable, that they'll lose faith in his strength. This isn't vanity. It's responsibility, or at least what he was taught responsibility looks like. And so, Even in his own living room, surrounded by people who love him, he can feel like he has to play a part. The provider, the steady hand, the quiet pillar. He's present physically, but emotionally walled off. And the walls didn't appear overnight. They were built every time he was told, "Don't cry." Every time he watched someone else get uncomfortable when he was vulnerable. Every time he felt his sadness might become someone else's burden. So now, when love reaches for him, he hesitates. Not because he doesn't long for closeness, but because he worries closeness will require him to keep pretending. Even in intimacy, especially in intimacy, this shows up. His partner may say, "I love you. I'm here for you." But somewhere deep inside, he fears that love is tied to who he appears to be, not who he really is. The mask he wears to keep everything functioning is the very thing that prevents him from feeling fully loved. And that's the cruel paradox. The very role that made him feel valuable is the same role that keeps him lonely. So even when surrounded by love, he often sits alone with his thoughts, carrying the quiet ache of never being able to just collapse. To simply say, "I'm not okay," without worrying about how that admission will ripple through the people who depend on him, without fearing that he'll lose their respect. And so, he chooses silence again, not because he wants to be distant, but because silence feels safer than the vulnerability he's never truly practiced. Safer, but lonelier. This is why even family love can feel unsafe to a man, because love that asks him to keep performing isn't safety. Safety is the freedom to finally take off the armor and still be held. So where does healing begin? How does a man, after decades of holding it all in, begin to feel seen, not just admired, but truly known? It starts small, and it starts quietly, because the path back to connection isn't paved with grand gestures or overnight fixes. It's paved with small acts of honesty with himself first. First step, he must learn to listen to his own silence. Instead of filling the space with distractions, work, television, routine, he can ask himself gently, "What am I feeling right now beneath the surface?" That's not easy. At first, the answer might be, "I don't know." But that's okay. Even asking the question is an act of rebellion against the armor he's worn too long. Second step, finding one space, just one, where he can speak without performance. It may not even be with his family at first. It could be an old friend who's earned his trust over years. It could be a journal written at midnight. It could be sitting quietly at the edge of a group listening, but present as himself. He doesn't have to tell his whole story all at once. He just needs to practice being unmasked in small moments. Third step, recognizing that his value was never in his perfection. This is the hardest shift. For years he believed that being a good man meant being the strong one always. But what if true strength is something quieter? What if strength is being able to say, "I'm tired today. I'm afraid. I need space." Not as an admission of weakness, but as a declaration of honesty. Because honesty, for men who've carried everything alone, is the first real doorway to intimacy. And what about those who love him? If you care for a man like this, a father, a husband, a brother, a friend, know this. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is to create a space where he doesn't have to perform, where silence is allowed, where pauses aren't awkward, where presence means more than perfection. Sometimes, love isn't about fixing him or drawing him out. Sometimes, love is about sitting quietly beside him, letting him know that when he's ready to speak, or even if he never does, you will not mistake his silence for coldness. You will understand that it's armor he's learning to set down, slowly. The truth is, men don't feel lonely because they aren't loved. Many feel lonely because they were taught that being loved means being useful, dependable, and strong, but not soft, not sad, not human. But here's the quiet hope. At any moment, he can decide differently. At any moment, he can realize that peace is not found in perfect performance, but in authentic presence, in letting go, just a little, in allowing himself to be seen imperfectly, honestly, vulnerably, and maybe, just maybe, when he risks that, he'll discover something surprising. That real love, the kind that heals rather than hides, was waiting for him all along. Not to admire his armor, but to honor the man beneath it. If you've ever felt this kind of loneliness even surrounded by love, drop a comment below. I'm learning to lay down my armor. You are not alone. Your peace is worth everything. And being seen, truly seen, starts with allowing yourself to be.